Ladies and gentlemen, today on the program, it's the holiday Hodgepodge. It's the Yuletide season, children, so we have a horrendous tale about Santa Claus? What? We're also talking about Joan Jett, Pac-Man, and Bahamas, and sharing an amazing new development about Love Grows Where My Rosemary Goes. Finally, enough with the freaking sleigh bells already! Thank you. There's also a valuable life lesson just in time for your COVID Christmas. So, Denny, be a good boy and roll intro. Hello, you're listening to the John Huff Podcast. Oh, yay. Got a question for you, kids. It's an important one, okay? Got something I need to ask you. Got something I need to know, man. Got something on my mind. And I want to put it out to all of you out there in podcast land. Gather round, kiddies. Get your notebooks ready. I want you to write down your answer. And tell me, everybody, how are your cockles, man? How are your cockles, man? You got the warm cockles going. You got the holiday season cockles going. Now, I got a lot of friends out there. Got a lot of listeners who are of the Shinto persuasion. So maybe the Christmas spirit isn't jumping all up on you right now. But you can still have the warm cockles. You know, I lived in Japan for a while. Spent a year living in the land of the rising sun, and what an experience that was, man. And there was a lot of Shinto happening around me, okay? Now, Shinto is a very natural, very spiritual religion. I don't even know if religion is the right word for this. This is a spiritual system. It's even looser than that, I think, but the Shinto faith, I suppose, has this reverence for nature. Very gentle, very peaceful. If you can picture, just picture for me, kids, like a mountain in Japan, or a hill, you know? And one of those ancient temples that you've probably seen in movies somewhere, maybe a travel documentary. And at the top of that mountain or that hill, and there's like these like technicolor leaves everywhere, and there's one of those like tiered temples, right? Got those roofs that you see in Japan, you know, and in China, ancient kind of building. And there's like a gentle white snow falling, right? And it's as peaceful as you can imagine any place on earth to be. That's the Shinto faith to me, and I was very impressed and moved and compelled by what I took to be the Shinto faith when I lived in Japan. But they were trying to get their handle on Christmas, right? Now, Japan's becoming far more Western than it ever was, post-World War II. And that comes from an American occupation, you know, makes sense, right? And so they've been trying to get, now this is 20 years ago that I lived there, all right? Now they're trying to get their handle on some of the Western kind of holidays, right? And Christmas is a big one, whether you celebrate it or not, or whether Christianity is your faith, whatever. Christmas is kind of symbolic in the West, right? So Japan was trying to get their handle around the Christmas thing, right? And I did not see this with my own eyes, but rumor abounded among us gaijin, among us foreigners who were living there, that there was a department store somewhere on the Japanese islands that, in attempting to build a suitable Christmas display for the season, had as their centerpiece of said display Santa Claus nailed to a cross. I should have a sound effect for that, but I don't. I don't know if this is true or not. If it's not, it's a cracking good rumor, man. Santa Claus nailed to a cross. Mixing up your metaphors there, man. Mixing up your traditions, okay? But I appreciate and I applaud the attempt. So how are your cockles, man? My wife and I put up a tree last weekend for the first time in several years. Because this is a COVID Christmas, man, and it's been kind of a heavy year, and so we felt like we needed something just a little bit uplifting, you know? Something with pretty lights. Now, the problem we've had is that we have several cats, okay? And two of them are relatively young, 4 and 2. Now, neither of those cats has seen a Christmas tree before, because you tend not to put up your Christmas tree when you've got a kitten, okay? You can imagine what might happen. And I always know, I always knew growing up, and I've known as an adult at different times, that the Christmas season is here when you find tinsel in your litter box. You know what I'm saying? Cats like to eat the tinsel, and then they leave you kind of a little Christmas present, like at 12 Days of Christmas, right down there in the litter box for you every morning. And ain't that sweet? But this year we needed kind of a pick-me-up, needed kind of an antidote to the COVID heaviness, wanted to bring in a little light, something a little bit festive, raise the mood, raise the vibration. So we put up the Christmas tree. Now my wife has a wonderful collection of delicate, very pretty, very beautiful glass ornaments given to her by a family friend over the course of her childhood, and didn't put those on the tree, man, didn't put them up. Because we had a suspicion, and we were right, that the little guy, the 2-year-old, was going to wreak havoc on that tree, and I think it stayed standing for about 15 seconds before the dude was all over that thing, and he was climbing it, and he was batting at the ornaments, and over the past week, the tree has been absolutely ravaged by this cat. Branches are all broken. They're all hanging, kind of in weird angles and dropping down to the floor. And we find like garland on the floor and lights on the floor and ornaments smashed, And you want to get mad at the cat and you're like, dude, stop it. And he will just look at you like, look, man, you don't really let me go outside on my own. You brought a tree into my living room and you hung 50 cat toys on it. Now you're going to get mad at me for going after that stuff, and the cat's point is well made. But we tried to raise the vibration, man. Tried to get a little bit festive in the old household, and I like the tree. And I said on a recent episode that I like Christmas, even if I hate a lot of the Christmas music, all right? Not a Grinch, not a Scrooge, not a curmudgeon, all right? None of the ghosts of Christmas past, present, future need drop by, all right? I'm down with the season. I like the vibe of Christmas, okay? And even if you're not, observing Christmas for religious reasons, you're just looking at it for cultural reasons, and it's part of your tradition as a person, you like Christmas, and I like it. I like the way it feels. I like that month of a kind of warm feeling, Now, I'm an empath, all right? I pick up the vibe in the air. It's one of the reasons that the COVID sent me for a tailspin this summer. Felt that fear out there, all right? Felt that anxiety, absorbed that anxiety, and it bubbled up in me. Made me kind of a wreck for a while. But I also feel the opposite, okay? So we get to the Christmas season, and I like the concept of cold outside, warm inside, and hearth and home and kith and kin, and the spirit of the Gwithwald family Gwithmouth. I like Christmas, all right? We don't usually put up a tree because putting up a tree is kind of a pain in the butt. And you got young cats that are going to make a misery of that tree. And, our youngest one is doing his best. But again, hang up a whole tree full of cat toys, you're kind of asking for it, right? So my cockles have been warm, man. And I hope your cockles have been warm too. But I got to tell you, I took a wobble, okay? It's going to happen sometimes, all right? Summertime, I went through a thing. There's going to be aftershocks, all right? And I got a little bit of overwhelm this week. Now, it wasn't all my fault. Developed a canker in the mouth. Talked about cankers in the mouth recently, and I gave you my 5-star rating cure for the cankers, or at least, a way to get relief, which is the tea tree oil. And I took that method, and for some reason, didn't take, man. And for the first time in a long time, got a full-blown canker in the mouth. Now, that is not herpes. I want all of you to just step back. It's okay. Not caused by the herpes virus, okay? This is something to do with acidity in the body, alkaline, something like that. And if you're prone to them, you're prone to them, man. My whole family is prone to them, and I've had horrendous ones at times of my life. And I was thinking about being a kid before I had twigged to the tea tree oil thing, and the kind of agony that a kid goes through dealing with this stuff in your mouth. The pain is outrageous for such a small little thing. Incredibly painful, all right? And I developed one of these things this week, and it was painful enough to keep me up at night, all right? So I was not sleeping, and I've also talked about how as I get older, lack of sleep really affects me, man. I get short-tempered, I get irritable, I get so irritable. And you think that's impossible for somebody with such a sunny disposition, Somebody who's all about the positive talk, man. But sometimes the positive talk is a remedy, kids, all right? Sometimes you're positive talking yourself into feeling better, you know what I'm saying? So I'm trying to put the positive talk in the world, but lack of sleep, older I get, man, the more that hits me. And I was not sleeping this week, okay? And then a couple of things just converged, man. A couple of things I wasn't expecting. Friend of mine got offered a showcase for some promoters, for some bookers, right? Needed a band, asked me to play, kind of short notice. Great, super, I appreciate that. But I started, feeling a bit of pressure on that because I haven't played out in a long time, and it shouldn't be a big deal. I've played hundreds of shows, but it was like I got to learn some music. Even though I played the drums on one of the recordings that we planned to perform, there were other songs I had to learn, right? And there were a couple of, parts in them that kind of pressured some of my weak points. And when that happens, I start to buckle pretty quick, man. And then I'm tired to go on top of that. And I felt a little bit of overwhelm coming in, I felt a little bit of smallness, I felt as though I was shrinking a little bit. And slipping into negative kind of thinking patterns, and I'm saying, like, I haven't got it, man. I can't handle this. I need to pass this off, freaking myself way out. And then as I'm dealing with that, I got another friend writes up and says, I'm putting together like a Christmas special thing, going to be really great. Do you and Ken the Zen want to perform? You record this thing, film it, send it in, and splice it into this, what will be an online Christmas special. Sounds like a great thing, right? And it is a great thing, and it's a lot of fun to do. And for somebody who has been trying to make a living as a musician, to suddenly have 2 music things to deal with, to focus on, to prepare for, that's kind of a nice thing, but it didn't initially hit me that way. The overwhelm hit me. It's like I'm suddenly on deadline for a couple of things, and I got to put them together, and I'm a little bit jumbled, and my confidence took a hit, and I'm tired, and so I had a wobble. And a wobble is just slipping back into the negative thinking, okay? Talking myself down, not believing in things and not believing in myself. And there was a time in my life when having a wobble like that was going to send me down the freaking rabbit hole, man. Going to send me into a kind of a tailspin, going to corkscrew myself into the proverbial ground. Good news is I've learned to recognize the wobbles, okay? And I've learned to get over my ego a little bit. And I've learned, and this is the key, kids, this is why I'm bringing this to you right now. Don't need to talk about my wobbles, don't need to express my vulnerabilities, but there's a lesson, okay? And the lesson is to begin to direct your thoughts toward the positive, okay? Because I catastrophize, right? I am a world-class professional Maradona, God rest his soul, level catastrophizer. Bring me a situation. I can tell you real quick how bad it could go, right? You know what I'm saying? And what the bad outcome could be. And that's a lousy way to live, dude. That is not going to make you happy, all right? That's not going to bring positive energy into your life. And I've found that circumstance tends to follow your energy, kids, okay? So if you're walking around all the time with the negative thoughts, with the negative impressions, catastrophizing about how bad stuff might go, then you're going to find yourself, I think, in these situations where things go badly. You set yourself up for that, man. And if you're into the vibrational stuff and the frequency stuff, speaking your world into existence, you start dwelling on the negative, you're setting yourself up to experience the negative. So the thing to do is to begin to see how things could go well. How I could freaking nail this performance, you know? How Ken the Zen and I can freaking nail this Christmas thing. And how there can be so much a positive outcome from that, and so much confidence from that, and so much to be excited about, and how things could go freaking well. And it's innocent enough, man, all right? This is a defense mechanism. You set yourself up to fail. You know, you kind of talk yourself down, you self-deprecate. And this is to lower the bar. This is to lower the expectation around you and to lower the expectation on yourself. But what you do is you cut out your potential. You undercut yourself. Now, it's one thing to underpromise and overdeliver, right? You've heard about that, right? So you walk into a situation knowing you're going to crush this thing, but you sell yourself down a little bit. But it's part of the game, and it's a strategy, and you know what you're doing. Just walking in, undercutting yourself because you don't know how well you're going to do, and being convinced that you won't do well, is going to make sure you don't do well, man. So my lesson to you here on the holiday Hodgepodge is to start thinking about how things could go well. Start seeing, instead of the catastrophe, start seeing the best possible outcome to this thing, right? You're walking into a job interview, you know? Think about how you could crush this and start to feel that. Start to imagine the ways this could go really great and be perfect, right? Or a performance of some sort, or a writing session, or just even the day at work, man. How could this go really, really well? How could I crush this? And doesn't that feel good? Doesn't it feel good to know you could crush something and to have that sense of accomplishment and a job well done and the confidence that rides with that? Now, I got to tell you, I only wobbled for a couple of days, and then I committed myself to working on all of this stuff as best I could, being as prepared as I could, and trusting all the prep that comes before this, man. When you're paying somebody who has experience, you're not paying for the moment, man. You're paying for the experience that led to the moment, that made that person capable. And sometimes you got to go back in your own life. Sometimes you got to go back in your own memory, your own history, and remember all the prep you've already done for whatever it is. Remember all the times you crushed it, man. And you got to bring that to the table, okay? And so I rededicated myself to thinking about how well this could go, being excited for the opportunities. Got to remember to be excited for the opportunities, especially when they've been as few and far between as they've been this year. And start seeing the optimistic side of it. And I tried to do that, and Ken the Zen came over today. Just today, my friends. This is Mad Friday. And we recorded what we worked out to do for this Christmas special, and it was a laugh, and it was funny, and it was silly, and we had a good time. If you ever see it, it'll warm your goggles. And there comes a momentum from that, man, and there comes a feeling of excitement and a bit of relief that that part's done. Then tonight we recorded another episode of the Music Trivia League. If you're not watching the Music Trivia League on YouTube, go check that out. That's our music trivia show. And there's momentum in that, man. And the other thing is that when you're actually doing these things, when you're applying to these things, when you're prepping for these things, it takes your mind off of catastrophizing about these things, man. And when you take your mind off of the things, a lot of the times the emotion goes away too, man. The bad emotion comes when you're thinking bad thoughts. So if you're actually working on the thing And focused on that, you distract yourself, and sometimes the feelings will go away. Most times. So all that to say, my cockles are feeling pretty warm here, kids. And I hope your cockles are feeling good too. Now this is the Holiday Hodgepodge. Normally when I come into an episode, I'm starting to develop a bit of a structure. I like to do a couple, maybe 3 kind of long form segments. But, this week I don't really have long form segments to focus on. So I'm doing the Holiday Hodgepodge, kids, and I hope it is in some way interesting to you. Now I got to give a shout out. Got to give a shout out to my boy Dews, all right? Now Dews is one of my oldest friends, and he wrote to me just after I recorded last week's episode when I revealed that Don't Stop Running by Y&T is my favorite hair metal song. And he wrote to me just after I recorded that thing. I had not released it yet. I had not spoken with anybody about it. And he had listened to the previous episode where I set that up. And he said, my guess is Don't Stop Running by Y&T. And I laughed to myself because why would you guess that? Now, he and I have talked about many things. Been friends for a long, long time. And we used to work the produce together. And I give Dews a lot of props, man. Because I was a dumb and really immature kid back in the produce days. The first part of them anyways. I was like 15, 16. Really dumb kid. And Dews was a couple years older than me, but a lot of years wiser, man. And Dews hung with your boy, and I appreciated that from him. Well, I went through various phases of being an immature, kind of an idiot. And Dews hung patiently all the way. Now, I have a theory about that, all right? I have a theory, and I think Dews was some sort of a visionary. And back in the late 80s, early 90s, I think he had it in his head that at some point in time, perhaps in the not too distant future, there would be an interactive web of technology based on computers, which we had in those days, by the way. And I think he had it in his mind that we would use those computers, that Al Gore would use those computers to build an interactive network, kids. And the computers could all talk to each other, and us, via computer, could connect with people all over the world. And I think Dews saw that coming. And I think he knew that that revolution in technology, that revolution in communications, that world-changing development, arguably the most significant development, particularly in the world of communication since the printing press, would spawn, among its wonders, platforms by which people could play fantasy sports. And I think he saw in me, idiot that I was, child that I was, someone who would take the initiative to start a fantasy hockey league when that interactive web, a kind of information superhighway, came into existence. And so Dews hung with me, and I caught up to his level of maturity, almost. And yeah, the day came, sometime around 2013, 14, 15, when I did start a fantasy hockey league, and Dews jumped right on board. So you gotta play the long game sometimes, kids. You gotta hang in, you know what I'm saying? You gotta see the potential, and you gotta ride it out. And sometimes you gotta put in the time. Sometimes you gotta exercise the patience. You can't have your interactive web and your fantasy hockey league overnight when the tech doesn't exist, man. But you gotta hold to that vision. And Dews did it. And I commend him for that. And there's a lesson in that, all right? Sometimes you gotta play the long game. Anyways, I write back to Dews and I says, really, Y&T? We never talked about Y&T before. We talked about a ton of other bands, you know? Never, to my knowledge, talked about Y&T, but Dews pulled that out. And I said, why do you pick Y&T? And he said, it's got a big chorus, got big harmonies, got kind of an FU message in it. And dang it, man. Dude read me like a book. And I didn't tell him he was right, but Dudes was right. Dudes, I want to thank you for, all the years of friendship. And I commend you for knowing me well enough to know that a song we never talked about was the right answer to the question. So I salute you, Dudes. All right. Now, if we're going to talk about formative music, which has been a theme over the past few episodes, I would be remiss if I did not mention I Love Rock and Roll by Joan Jett. Now listen, I love Joan Jett, okay? Joan Jett is the original badass in my mind. You watch her in the video for I Love Rock and Roll, man. This like badass girl, man, just stomping across the road, heading into the, where the jukebox is, heading into that little joint. And I'm like, I don't know. Does she date? Like, I'm looking at that character walking across the road. Like, does she date? She's not a girly girl, and I know that's not a prerequisite for dating. I'm not profiling in any way. She just, the way she's, got that scowl on her face, the way she's walking across the street. I'm thinking, what dude out there could possibly measure up? Who has the sort of gravitas? Who has the fortitude to hang with that? Because she'll tear you apart, man. And I love Joan Jett, and I love rock and roll. Now, when I was a small boy, just a kid, one of the first rock songs I ever heard was I Love Rock and Roll by Joan Jett, okay? Now, this is 1981, kids. That makes your boy like 8 years old. Just a boy. And, this is getting to be a while ago, nearly 40 dang years, and so I'm forgetting perhaps some of the details of this, but at my little elementary school, you could go up to the library and walk past the card catalog. Now, some of you younger listeners might not remember the card catalog, but you couldn't just go and call up the online catalog and type in the book you wanted, and it would spit out whether they had it, where it is, what's in it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You had to go to a card catalog. This was a physical thing, right? Like a huge shelf, and it had little drawers in it, right? And you'd pull out the drawer, and it would be a section of the alphabet. You kids know the alphabet, right? You've heard that song? Yeah. Okay. And you had to flip through the cards to find the book in question, And then you'd have to, take the card or write down the number and then go to the corresponding shelf and all that stuff, right? You couldn't just order it and then go pick it up. And so you walk past the card catalog, which takes up half the dang library, right? And there was little tables in the corners, and they had cassette players or something. Must have been. And big headphones, man. It was super cool. And you could sit around these round tables, and they had little tape players or whatever, and you could play the cassettes and listen. I don't think I hallucinated this. I think this is actually real. This happened. So I can remember many happy hours kind of sitting with the headphones on, listening to whatever music was available. I don't remember the details of this very well. Can you picture that scene in The Shawshank Redemption? We're getting fairly well along in the movie, and the library that Andy Dufresne built is up and running, full capacity, right? And you got the dude sitting there, and he's listening to, I don't know what it is, Merle Haggard or something on the headphones, and he's bobbing his head, Make him 8 years old, and that's me listening to the music around the circular table in the corner of the library. And for whatever reason, I Love Rock and Roll was one of the songs that we can hear, and I loved that song, man. It was dangerous. Now, I'm an 8-year-old kid, come from kind of a sheltered background, Now, we know about Love Grows Where My Rosemary Goes, and I'm about to tell you a secret about that, but not just yet. And hearing this music for the first time with the electric guitars and the Joan Jett with that yowl that she had. She was so cool, man. I love Joan Jett. And that was one of the songs, man. I Love Rock and Roll was one of my gateway songs. And that predates Panama, which we talked about, and the Twisted Sister that we talked about, some of that stuff. It even predates Y&T, man. That goes way, way back, man. Joan Jett. I Love Rock and Roll. Now, one of the other curiosities they had around the table in the library past the card catalog was they had the album Pac-Man Fever. Now, do you know the album Pac-Man Fever. Some of you younger ones, again, my younger listeners, that demographic, you might not know the Pac-Man. Or it may be, culturally iconic enough that you know the Pac-Man. Maybe you've even played the game sometime and you've looked at that and gone, man, you kids were so deprived back in the day. We didn't have photorealistic blood happening, you know what I'm saying? We had the Pac-Man and the Ms. Pac-Man, right? And what you may not know, though, even if you know the Pac-Man game, is that Pac-Man was such a cultural phenomenon that they actually made an album, okay? Buckner and Garcia. The legendary Buckner and Garcia made an album called Pac-Man Fever, okay? And the songs were all songs based on popular video games at the time. I'm going to give you your track list. We had Pac-Man Fever, Froggy's Lament. That's about Frogger, kids. Watch the Seinfeld episode. We had Ode to a Centipede, which would be about the game Centipede. Do the Donkey Kong, Hyperspace, The Defender. Defender was one of my favorite Atari games, by the way. Mousetrap, and Goin' Berserk. And they made this record of songs, rock songs mostly, all about your popular video games at the time. And this was a release in like 81, 82. And here's the part where I want you to sit down, kids, all right? Here's the part where I want you to leap that barrel coming down the ladder. They sold 2.5 million copies of the single Pac-Man Fever and over 1 million copies of the freaking record. That record went platinum, kids. I assume those numbers are American sales. So, whenever you think your dream is too silly, I want you to remember Pac-Man Fever. Now, you can go on YouTube and you can hear this. And you can marvel at the wonder, the cultural wonder that was the 1980s, kids. And so, I guess Pac-Man Fever is probably another formative song. I was never a big Pac-Man fan, okay? I liked the Frogger. River Raid was probably my favorite Atari game. I'm sure there are people listening to this show who've never even heard the word Atari. And let me tell you something, if you didn't have a 2600, my friends, you missed out. And I had one, and I still have one somewhere. And I liked the River Raid. That was a game where you fly your airplane. It's like a scroller. It's like an up and down scroller. I don't know if there's a word for that, but like the landscape is coming down the screen and you're flying your airplane and you're blowing stuff up and you're trying not to bang into things, and it gets increasingly fast and increasingly narrow. And in those days, man, you had a joystick and a button. That's all you had, man. There were no modifiers. There was no BS. The games had to actually be challenging and fun. There were none of these cutscenes. There was none of this looking at your watch, waiting for a bunch of characters you don't care about to shut up so you can get on with the game. There wasn't an 18-button controller that everything modifies each other, and you don't even know which way is up, and a 10-year-old you're playing against is scoring 18 goals on you before you even know the game's on. Or he's blowing your head off on the Call of Duty map where you can't even figure out which way you're pointing the gun, and you're riddled full of bullets already. 10-year-olds, man, with their little fingers, they're not even supposed to be able to play those games. These are R-rated, kids. And they're blowing my head off every Friday night on the Call of Duty. And I'm doing the Lewis Black point right now. And if you haven't listened to the Two Lose episode, you'll go and hear what the Lewis Black thing is about. Anyhow, I liked River Raid. River Raid was probably my favorite Atari game. But I liked Berserk too. And I liked Indiana Jones. And I feel like I would have liked Pitfall, but I could never seem to get my hands on that. In any case, they made a soundtrack to all these games. It sold 1 million freaking copies, and I used to listen to it alongside the magnificent Joan Jett around the corner table in the library at my elementary school. And how freaking cool is that, man? Now, this performs a bit of a segue. We're talking formative music, and we're talking my elementary school, and at that elementary school, this is going to knock your socks off, kids. So you put stuff out there, right? And you hope that the world out there listening responds with information. And information came my way this week that was fun and a bit of a mind bender, all right? We're talking about my elementary school. My sister, one of my older sisters, maybe all of them, I don't remember, but one of them, Gwendolyn, older than me, went to that school, the same one with Joan Jett and the corner table and the card catalog. And when she was in grade 6, kids, for those of you in America, that's 6th grade. And in Europe, you're going to have to write and tell me what that is to you guys, all right? That's like 11 years old, right? My sister, Gwendolyn, reached the finals of the school public speaking contest and wowed the crowds, made them laugh, made them cry, with a speech about her little brother, who was me, all right? So it's kind of written in the stars, kids. You know, they were talking about me, kind of like the Magi, you know, heading to the Christ child. 'Tis the season. So they were talking about me in those days, kids, and I would have been about, I suppose, 5 or so. And Gwendolyn not only reaches the school final, 6th grade for you Americans, they invite her and somebody else down to the local radio station to present the speech on air. Now, this is where it gets interesting, kids. This is where the woo-woo stuff starts, right? This is where the hairs begin to stand up on the back of your neck. Because she goes in there, Gwendolyn, 11. She goes into the radio station to deliver this speech on air. And kudos to you, I might add. Takes a lot of courage, takes a lot of stones. And as a reward for visiting the station and for reaching that level of the competition, as I understand it, they give Gwendolyn the choice of a 45 vinyl record, all right? They're giving out vinyl singles to the kids. And she picks, we're not sure, we think, she picked You Light Up My Life by Debbie Boone because, hey, you know, sometimes you just gotta dance. And we think the B-side to the Debbie Boone single was Love Grows Where My Rosemary Goes by Edison Lighthouse. I have not had this confirmed. I would like the vinyl people to go and search and see if such a record exists. I don't know if that would have been like a label thing. I don't know why. I don't know what year You Light Up My Life came out. Now, this would have been 1979-ish, let's say. 78, 79. Edison Lighthouse has been out for almost a decade by that point, so I don't know. Like maybe the radio station had a bunch of old 45s laying around and like, we're going to play this again. Let's give them to the kids, right? Kids like things that go in circles, don't they? And so I don't know the backstory on the actual record, or if in fact it was a B-side to that Debbie Boone thing somehow. I don't know how that would have worked. Must have been a label sampler or something if that was the case. But the point is, what became my favorite song, and I'm declaring that now, all right? I'm declaring it year 2020, and there's a symmetry to that, man, because that single was 1970. So 50 years later, back in the public consciousness, being broadcast to the millions around the globe, hashtag John Huff Podcast, I'm declaring Love Grows Where My Rosemary Goes my favorite song of all freaking time. And that song came into my life, into my home, because my sister won a contest with a speech about me. Boom! How are you going to get better than that, kids? You know what I'm saying? The symmetry, the fearful symmetry. It's powerful, isn't it? Ooh, the universe is at work here, man. It's kind of like the Terminator thing, man. It's like timelines eating themselves. It's spooky, and I had to take a minute and sit down when she told me that. But where's the record? Where's the record? Where's the piece of furniture that I used to play it on? Somebody tell me, man. Somebody get the background on whether there was ever issued a Debbie Boone single, You Light Up My Life, with Edison Lighthouse, Love Grows Where My Rosemary Goes, as the B-side, or vice versa. I don't know, man, but I think it's cool, and I like the symmetry, and I like how that information came to me just this week. Maybe last week. No, it's just this week. And I'm stoked about that, and I do love that song. And so kudos to you, Gwendolyn, for picking that record. Life changer, right? My favorite song ever comes off a speech written about me. Doesn't that warm your cockles, man? Doesn't that do something for you? I don't know. Are you more impressed by the Buckner Garcia thing, that they wrote a bunch of songs about video games and sold over 1 million copies of that thing? You can probably stream it. And, you know, that brings me to the next thing on the Hodgepodge, which is the Spotify stuff. And I don't know what to say about the Spotify thing, because I'm really torn as an artist, although I don't particularly have a horse in the race right now. Like, I don't have a band that I'm playing in that I'm putting our music on the Spotify, not since I left Hearts. But I do publicity for people, and I'm trying to get Spotify playlists just to play the music. But then you see the numbers coming out, right? It's like, oh, we had 300,000 streams this year and whatever, and okay, and then you realize how little Spotify pays, and you're like, this ain't right, man. Should we be celebrating this? I don't know, but then you look at it as a publicist, you know, the streaming as a vehicle for sharing music. And we've gone old school in the sense of the money's in the performance now, so it's like, okay, here's a calling card for the performance, like this song, like this record. Hear it out there and then want to come see us play, but of course you can't come see us play right now because the COVID shut that down. So it's all freaking weird, and then you see these Spotify folks getting mega rich off of it and the artists not getting mega rich off it, and doesn't sit too well, man, but I'm not sure which position to really take up on that. And it wigs me out a little bit. Gotta say, it wigs me out a little bit, but I got some interesting information off of the Spotify because all the year-end stuff's coming out right now. And what I found out is that my most streamed stuff this year was 3 songs from Bahamas. But you didn't see that coming. That should have been the next contest. I should have listed like 8 artists that may have been the ones most listened to by your boy this year. And then we could have done the whole thing again. And then Deuce could have wrote me. Deuce could have wrote and said, well, I think it was Drake probably, you know, because I like to dance, kids, you know, I like to shake it. But in fact, I was listening to Bahamas this year. I did not stream a lot. Okay. I'm not a big Spotify user, but it is dang handy. If you're putting together, like when I was teaching drums a little bit, I'd have a list of like a Spotify playlist of stuff we could work on, right? Or songs that we could use to practice a technique or a fill or a groove or whatever. It was handy to have that right there, you know, which I suppose I could have done in Apple as well, but that's not the point. I don't stream a lot, but I was playing a lot of Bahamas this year because I was learning some of the music, because Jason Tate is arguably my favorite drummer, right? Go see episode 4, I think, which was a highlight of my public life, by the way. To sit down for an hour, face-to-face, pre-COVID, and talk to Jason Tate, one of my favorite drummers, and he gave me an awesome interview, and you should go listen to it, especially if you missed the interview episodes. So I was playing along with some Bahamas because that is not the style of music that I would really ever normally play. It's got like this bouncy vibe to it. I don't know how you describe Bahamas. It's kind of pop, but it's like indie pop. It's not really music that you will hear on the radio, except CBC in Canada. There's a whole legion of artists who are like CBC artists, right? And they're great and they're wildly popular. You never really hear them on mainstream commercial radio, but they have a following, and I'm not sure how they get it. Soundtracks maybe, you know, or they get played on like cool indie radio stations or whatever. Bahamas is one of those. And it's really just a dude called Afi, and that's his public name, is Bahamas, that he performs under. And Jason Tate is his drummer, and Bahamas is great. And I was listening to a lot of their music, his music, And I was drumming along to it because I was kind of, trying to pick up some of Jason Tate's vibe, some of his way of playing. And he plays so simple on these records. It's really beautiful. And I really appreciate his style so much. And I'm trying to emulate that. So I'm learning kind of some of the stuff he does. And so my main streaming was 3 songs in particular that I was listening to that you should check out. They are Way with Words, No Depression, and No Wrong. And they all come from his 2018 record, Earth Tones, that Jason Tate played on. Now, Bahamas also dropped a new record this year called Sad Hunk. I really like Bahamas. He's a really great songwriter, and he's got a vibe that's all his own, man. But they'll go and they'll open for like Jack Johnson. So if you're into that vein, I don't know if that's a vein, but Afy falls somewhere on that spectrum as Bahamas. So this is indie pop. There's like a bounce and a vibe to what he does. And I don't have the musical vernacular, the vocabulary to explain just what that is. You got to go listen to it, but he's really great. And some of the lyrics are super dark. Some of them are super funny. Some of them are super ironic. There's just a vibe and a melody and a flow to this. And Jason Tate is a big reason for a lot of that, man. The way he plays those songs, the drumming on those records that he played on is just really great. And I was trying to cop it, Sometimes you learn by emulation. Any musician will tell you that. And so Bahamas was my top streamed artist of the year. And I don't know how Afy feels about that, okay? Maybe he appreciates, like he sees the value in the streaming. And I mean, a couple of his songs have like mega streams, right? Lost in the Light has over 100 million. So, that's a lot there's probably some money in that, for Afy and Bahamas. So, and he's got others with like tens of millions of streams. So somebody's listening out there. It's not all just me. And good for him, man. So I don't know if he's mad at Spotify or if he's down with Spotify, but he was my most streamed artist. And Jason Tate, you're the reason why. So, Afy should be giving you a little Christmas bonus, a little holiday top up, for that. And the second most streamed artist was our own Karen Emeny. Now, you may not know Karen. Karen is a local artist, and she's great. She dropped an EP called The Right Mistakes this year. And I was all set to be the drummer at Karen's EP release show, and the COVID came and kiboshed the EP release. All right, now I did get to do some publicity for her, and we had a pretty good run getting her songs placed around out there. And so I was streaming her record so I could learn to play it. And so Karen, maybe you want to top up your boy over here because I accounted for some of your streams. You know what I'm saying? I'm just kidding. You don't got to top up anything. But it's a great record, all right? Go listen to Karen Emeny, The Right Mistakes. It's got like a late 90s vibe, kind of an Alanis thing. And she's really cool, and I like her a lot. And I do look forward someday to playing with her, actually, when we are able to get up on a stage and do that again. So my record recommendations to you kids today on the Holiday Hodgepodge are Earth Tones by Bahamas, and then go check out Sad Hunk, which is the new record, and then go check out Karen Emeny's The Right Mistakes, okay? And maybe I can... Well, I'll certainly put a video in the show notes, all right? I'll put a little Bahamas, I'll put a little Karen in the show notes. Might even put Pac-Man Fever. And you can check those out on my website, john-huff.com/podcast. And you can hear that stuff there. And go stream these artists, okay, man? They don't do the radio play thing, so they need support from other places. So, first thing, buy the records, all right? Go to Bandcamp. Go to Apple, wherever you can still purchase records, do that, all right? Because $10 into the artist's pocket is better than some streams, all right? There's more money to be had that way. And Bahamas got to eat too, man. So buy the records, okay? If you refuse to do that, which is your prerogative, then stream them, all right? But just go check out this music. There's some really great music out there that maybe you haven't heard. And I'm going to do my best to bring it to you week after week as I uncover it. And if there's stuff I need to hear send it to me, all right? Send it to me and I'll give you a shout out and I'll check out what that music is and we'll talk about it, all right? Bahamas, Earth Tones, Sad Hunk, Karen Emeny, The Right Mistakes. Now I'm going to jet, kids. I got a long list of stuff to talk about on the Hodgepodge. The other thing that the Spotify told me with respect to the podcast, little bit troubled to find out that I'm not charting high with the 18 to 22-year-old demographic. And that surprises me because we know 18-year-old kids in 2020 like the hair metal, man. So why these kids aren't tuning in to find out about the Striper and the Steel Panther and then to duck on over and hear about the Pac-Man and the Terminator, I'm mystified as to why I'm not resonating with that demographic. And the other scary thing, the 60 to 150-year-old demographic not tuning into the show, man. Now, we know that 98-year-olds and 120-year-olds are big podcast people. So how I'm missing that, I don't know. I talked about World War I. You 150-year-olds out there, you experienced it, all right? You were adults when it happened. You're not tuning in to listen about that? I am shocked, and I don't know what to do about it. So my goal for 2021, let's get after those 18 to 22-year-olds that want to hear about hair metal, want to know about Y&T, and let's get after those 150-year-olds who want to relive their youth, okay? So I'm going to be talking a lot of American Civil War, Franco-Prussian War, I suppose that will be a topic at some point, Industrial Revolution, flight, got to pull in those listeners because we know that those 100-plus-year-olds are big podcast people. I'm going to go now, kids. If your cockles weren't warm before, I hope they are now. Maybe that should be a new catchphrase for the show, you know what I'm saying? Hope you're doing okay. I had a wobble. If you've had a wobble, I want you to start looking at how things could go right, okay? How things could go well. How this situation could turn out super, And go try to take in the joy of the season as much as you can, even if you're not a Christmas person, even if you're one of my Shinto followers. Enjoy the snow falling. Enjoy the silence, I'll be back in a week. We'll talk about some more stuff. Might be another hodgepodge. I don't know. Go listen to some good music. Tell me about the good music you listen to. Take care of yourselves. And, hey, I'll be back soon, kids. Check you later. Thank you once again, gentle listener, for taking in today's show. If you want to know more about the program, go to www.john-huff.com. That's JOHN-HUFF.com and click on podcast. You can also find the show on Facebook at The John Huff Podcast. If you're an Instagram person, you can find me at JW_Huff. If you're a Twitter person, you can find me at JWSHuff. No matter where you listen to the show, please do me a big, big favor and leave a rating and review. Preferably a positive one. That's all the time we have for today, but I'll be back very soon. Until then, keep your wits about you and remember, good things happen when you put yourself out there. Bye for now. Go, Froggy, go! You gotta keep on hopping till you get to the top. Go, Froggy, go! You gotta keep on hopping, you can never stop.